Well, I thought today, since we talked about what the feminine mysteries weren't to a certain extent last time, in terms of the abyss and whether or not a female could speak the word, that we would talk about what the feminine role is in the magical journey, which I'll do up to you and add my own additions as they arrive. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Yeah. So
In your opinion, what is the female's role in the magical journey?
okay. So I think probably we're talking about Crowley and sexual magic, because there is a distinction. Because I mean, some women, might just be pursuing a spiritual path and stuff, and not really necessarily lean into their bodies or something as part of that, or maybe they do it in a different way. So I just wanted to clarify that, like, at least that's what I was thinking you mean. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Uh, so I guess there's at least a couple things that come to spring to mind for me. One of which is that over the years of kind of paying attention to, what is it that I add to the equation, it seems as though that the female body seems to be uniquely aligned to the elemental world, so sort of Malkuth and below of the elemental world, that we seem to be able to directly marshal those forces.
As agape, though, as a higher principle.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in general, we can marshal the forces, but like the ideal is as agape. So, do you want to say anything about that?
No, I was just thinking about from the male perspective. It's the Thelema is the mind, and so it's our job to clear the mind and empty it, in a meditative sort of somatic experience. Whereas the females is to be fully embodied and present to the body. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so J. Edward Cornelius had always taught me to focus on ajna while engaged in sexual magic. So I think the idea there is, in a sense, basically, we're all, in a sense, in the Crowleyan world, worshiping the phallus. So for me, that's an internal principle. It's obviously not something that's a feature of my body. It's a feature of sort of like the hidden side of me or something. So then that would be embodied in, let's say, you, my partner. So that's something where if I'm focusing on ajna, then I'm basically, in effect, taking all of those elemental forces and nurturing that higher principle, in that way. So it's not just me thinking about stuff I want, or something, but rather by just sort of also clearing my mind, just being within my whole body, like you just said, focusing on ajna, and then you're directing in whatever way you're doing that. Then together we're channeling the will is the ideal. So I think that's what you're saying with agape. I think this might be a cool time to talk about this picture. This is Jerry's picture. This is, I don't know, it's not a tarot picture, but it represents nevertheless what a woman can do on the path of Ka. So here it shows, I think this is basically showing like the man and the woman are maybe physically separated in this particular instance. So he's in his mind, he's in his astral journey, in his dreams, and so is she. She might be awake. In this case, she's like actually physically like masturbating, and she's focusing on ajna. So she's actually connecting with the male sex magician, the astral magician, the phallic magician, in a sense on the astral. So they're meeting on the astral, and he's directing things from the astral. So that's like an illustration, because even whether you're separated or not, in a sense, this is the form, I think, of that union. And the woman using her body as the vehicle for the power to be channeled from heaven to earth.
And since the two phalluses here are separated in a sense, like from the astral to the physical, this would maybe signify the embodiment, like of the God principle on one level, and then the male's role on another.
Like,
right?
if you mean his like physical genitalia.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because you have an actual physical representation, but then you have another, like he's sort of in the background in that astral realm, right?
Sorry, so can you say a little bit more on what you have in mind with that? Like, you're saying like there's two phalluses in a sense.
Well, in a sense, like from my experience, you empty your mind and just let whatever is being channeled come through you. So in a sense, it's not really. There's two. The mind gets sort of split in a way, I guess you could say. There's somebody at the forefront, but you're always at the back end of it, like being able to observe whatever's at the forefront, the God that you're embodying. The one true God, perhaps, hopefully, and not some other manifestation, right? Yeah. So in a way, it's like you're projecting yourself out and looking in on a certain act, I guess you could say. And like here, it seems like he's beside a burning fire, a bare tree. He's like on the mountain, right? Not sure.
When you say the mountain?
Yeah, the mountain of initiation, the holy mountain, as the movie goes. But then at the same time, if you turn it sideways, then you have your window is going at this direction in the lamp and everything, and so she's sort of, and this phallus is only the phallus. There's no body attached to it on the bed.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so,
I do.
So it's like a god, and it's a god like see how much bigger it is than, like if it was just a male and a female doing some mundane copulation or something, right?
Yeah, or even doing black magic, meaning doing stuff for earthly wants, which Crowley has been known to do as well.
Right. Think about money or whatever.
Yeah, get this woman, get this money or whatever. But yeah, so knowing Jerry, that certainly was in alliance with his teachings, in that he had originally taught me to basically ignore the man completely, ignore, as in him at the time, ignore his persona. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if I 100% agree with that. That's maybe another topic for another video. But but the idea was,
well, if the persona is present, I can see that. But what if it's not? What if you're embodying the God at the time? Then I don't think it makes sense to ignore somebody that's embodying something in a physical way.
Yeah,
at the time.
Yeah, maybe it was his kindergarten teaching for me or something. I don't know. It's hard to say because he was a kind of deep guy who would, have nuances and things. But in any case, I think he definitely agrees that like the woman is to be focusing on the God. And I also like what you just said about the fact that the orientation of the woman is basically like this. Mm-hmm. So it's like, here's her on her bed, on her back, and then here's her window, and just outside there's a mountain, interestingly, a little hill or something. So she's in one orientation, he's another, but this is the actual orientation of the picture, which I think says that the man is working vertically, or in other words, he's working from Hokmah, and then the woman is working horizontally. She's working from Mount Muladhara.
So paths of Daleth and Binah, right? Or are you talking about?
She's working from.
The Muladhara would be, of course, another round or another sphere, but you know what I mean, like the door. She's the doorway.
Yeah, so she can be elevated to become the doorway, and this is how. So this is kind of like the beginning of the process, I guess you could say, because this is actually, even though it's not the tarot, I don't think it's this tarot moon. This is, I don't think, this is naturally working the path of Qoph, QOPH.
Right, from Malkuth to Netzach.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So
he has the sword pointing up in this case instead of down.
And what does that signify?
Well, the sword could be reason. It could be a lot of things, right? And the woman girl with the sword, she always has the sword pointing down, mm-hmm. right? And so there's a protective aspect of things, I guess you could say. I don't know. What would you have to say about that?
Hey, that's
because
not fair.
Even in Parsifal, he disarms himself. He takes off his gear, and I think the sword does point up. I'll have to reread
it. Does.
It
does. Right at the end of Act 3.
Right.
It does, and everybody's sort of like, he's looking at it, and Kundry's looking at it, and sort of like that's like the focal point of the entire operation.
Maybe reason has attained God through a gnosis that's not just Dathian knowledge.
Yeah, maybe it's the sword rather than the dagger, so it's not really reason so much as like the lance is more like
lance cup.
Yeah,
right.
So it's like the higher phallus or something, and that's maybe what this is representing. I don't know.
So the ability to just channel the higher phallus, basically, just pointing and you don't, when you get to that point, you don't need this protective ensconcement.
Yeah.
As he sconces.
Yeah. So so the woman essentially being that demonic channel for the higher phallus, which is the will. It's the universal will.
And how would the woman, say the operation occurs and the woman receives the power, like how does she ideally utilize that?
Um, utilize that. That's an interesting
Because the
word.
woman is power, you know. So I mean, it seems like she would employ it in some way, whereas the man channels the power to her, but she's the one that embodies it, and so therefore,
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I wouldn't have used the word utilize only because that sort of implies, I think, a more active role than what I perceive it to be and what I read in Crowley. But the most active part at the end of sexual magic is that the woman performs is probably exemplified in what he talks about in his zodiac, when he talks about the zodiac, which is like his a code, another coded set of instructions for sexual magic, Sagittarius, which is also temperance, the path of art.
and on and yeah.
So she's
Semek prop.
yeah. So she's supposed to be kind of more dominant in that path, and that's like if there's ejaculation, which there's is not always, but then afterwards, then she's sort of like an after sort of some time has passed, so that there's kind of like, assuming all of everything has gone right up until that point, then she's kind of like basically overseeing like the mixing or the complete unification of those principles. So
Coagulation.
yeah, but I don't think there's really much to do really, except essentially again devoiding her mind of any any intent in the sense, because all it is just the pure worship and the pure intent, except the intent to nurture.
Maybe I said that because I mean, for the most part, most women can't embody. It seems that, or it's very difficult to find a woman that can embody that principle of being able to accept things, the will, and then have it work through them, undiluted. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And I'm sure your background has spoken to that. You know.
yeah. I mean, I think the hard part is that most men would not be a good choice for partners because they would be selfish, that they would have some thought in mind. So the idea that to find a spiritual enough man is so difficult that maybe women are like appropriately skeptical or something. I think that's the positive side of what we could say, and then the negative side is women also can be very ego oriented. I mean, I think
We're all people, right?
the age of Aquarius in particular, sort of like the idea is like we all matter, so we should all be trying to figure out who we are and stuff. But I think that process in the early stages is very selfish and self oriented, and so it's kind of like figuring all that out and then sort of like seeing through your incarnation and sort of using it as a channel as opposed to identifying with it. And I think that I think a lot of women, necessarily because we're coming out of an aeon where, the Piscean aeon, where women were kind of like, and because of this demonic feature, we're allied with like evil and the devil and stuff. So it's like there's kind of a defensiveness on our part, and that I think is hard to overcome. It's hard to work through that to the point of being, and then finding, a partner that would be appropriate, and to be able to kind of just let go and trust that what we're to receive is going to be pure. Because
well, that's going to be the disparity between male and female, because you have restriction, you have expansion. It's sort of like the Geborgian and then the Hesidian context, right? So you have expansion and contraction. They all equal out in the end, but nevertheless, you've got those two things sort of balancing each other, right? And so to see women as restrictive, I mean, would you agree that that's a general tendency of the feminine?
I would. I mean, so that's the whole idea that, in a way, behind being elemental or daemonic is that the daemon, like our personal daemons or anything of that realm, is in a sense neutral. So it's kind of like it can be used for good or ill, and a woman is the same way. She can use her powers for good or ill, if you will. So there's no that idea of sort of like being a vessel or being something that's the receptive partner, it necessarily is restrictive in the sense that it has a form and can easily shade over into restrictive in the negative sense in the book
Peaches.
of the law. Yeah, so exactly. So
soft overcomes the hard.
Yeah, and accept all. So that's like the instruction, the good instruction for the woman, or whatever's peaches from the book of lies. So it's sort of accepting all impressions, bear to them all equally. So it's not like picking and choosing, being basically fully receptive. But that takes a lot of trust, I guess, and that's the hard thing I think for a lot of women, is that they're still trying to prove themselves or something in their minds, and I've definitely kind of relate to that. It's hard to get to the stage in which you just sort of let go and accept the fact that, like, in fact, we're all just vehicles of the will. That's a very hard stage to get to.
Because we want an identity, we want an I, we want a presence, we want something to hold on to.
Yeah,
And
because
if you do that, then you lose those handholds on reality.
yeah, I mean, it's very painful, and I think something that takes a lot of preparation. It's not something someone can just jump into or something from the get go. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but so yes, the yin is restrictive. So a woman has to kind of like, and that's where I think in the Book of the Law where it talks about kill your heart. I don't necessarily take that as like she should just be a cold, like, bitch that kind of like seduces all guys or whatever girl they
Sociopath or something.
I don't take it that way at all, but I do take it that I think there's a certain amount of letting go of that sentimental ideal of, sort of like having an identity and being someone and having a normal life and all that stuff that I think is particularly hard for women to let go of. It's hard for everyone, and most, not every individual, but like most guys and most women, but I think especially women are more oriented toward relationships and things like that. So to have the duty of being able to be restrictive enough to serve as a pure channel or avatar of the universal will, but not so restrictive as to be sort of an ordinary woman, who basically likes to own her partner, especially in a heterosexual context. It's like what we see on the sitcoms all the time, where the woman kind of like is the boss and controls everything. There is that tendency. I mean, it's in me. It's in every woman, I think, that walks the earth and just wants to sort of control things, and sort of like, because we are so aligned with and part of Malkuth, that we kind of love to have things in order. So there is a certain amount of unnaturalness, which I think is what that verse is referring to. If you're going to be a successful Scarlet Woman, you have to give up being an ordinary woman, although you'll retain some of those qualities. I guess it's a little hard to be specific, but that is what I think has to happen there. I'm curious, from your perspective as a man, do you think there's a difference? I mean, you kind of referenced it earlier, like, do you think there's a difference in quality in terms of the ability of women to channel, if they're appropriately Scarlet Women or not? And I'm thinking like Crowley used to use like just prostitutes and just any women and stuff. So I mean, I think from his perspective, he seemed to think,
oh yeah, for sure. Like
it didn't matter.
You have to have somebody that has experienced, had experience, like you've had personal experience in a lot of different areas that make you highly qualified for the role of Scarlet Woman, and not having those experiences, I think, would change things dramatically. And so if you just pick any random person, it's sort of like not as bad, I think, as a woman picking any random guy off the street and receiving their word that's unfocused, or something. But nevertheless, it's bad juju.
Can you tell the difference?
Can I tell the difference? I would have to say that when I was in my previous relationship, when I was married, that I did not put her in that active role necessarily until the very end there, before she said, well, I can't go down the same path that you're going down. And I'm like, well, that's fine, that's fair. And then we split up or something. But so I really don't have much of a basis of comparison between being married for 24 years and then being married again now to completely different people. I mean, in a geographical sense too, like all the way across the world.
What about like maybe other sex magic partners that you've had in the interim?
There have been people that have been able to generate money and superficial things to use their powers to do. It's like, okay, we're gonna sell more Enochian boards or something, and then all of a sudden a bunch of sales.
So presumably, like the spiritual attainment, from your perspective, the spiritual attainment of the woman
is very important.
Matters. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way, but of course I'm a little bit biased because that's what I care most deeply about, and that's what I work on. So I mean, that's certainly my perspective, but it's interesting, good to hear that for you also you've noticed that it makes a difference in terms of the product or whatever of the pairing.
Yeah, it's certainly not just a woman's job to say either on or no. You know what I mean? It's, I mean, she can say no, and it's very important, but it's also very important for the male as well.
What do you mean?
It's to say to judge the qualities of the man and realize whether or not he is a spiritual person, to watch very closely and to spend enough time to determine whether this person is faking or lying or imposter of some sort, or has a hidden agenda, or just like you got to do with everybody ultimately. I mean, especially in this particular realm of existence, meaning the occult realm. There's a lot of deception that goes on, as in every other one, but in particular, there's a certain type. And if you can just wait it out long enough, I think you can see a person's true qualities. And so the woman has to say, no, I'm not going to accept this influence into my being, and then embody it and nurture it from a person that isn't worthy of, the title, I
Right.
guess you could say.
Yeah, because you have to spend a very long time, like that's what the OTO mysteries are about, right? Spending a very long time learning how to wield your physical phallus as basically a universal instrument, not something that you own. That takes a great deal of purity and control and things like that.
And that's what Parsifal is about, 7th-degree chastity. I mean, you move it. And then the subsequent degrees after that, even, they develop on chastity. So it is a very nice to the round table of courtly, but godly, very, very godly thing. And that's why you can't rise up through these levels unless you believe in something. You can't be an atheist and make it. So.